David Simmons. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I shall be brief, having had the opportunity of making some interventions. As a Conservative, I believe that the case is now robustly made for a change in position. And the reason for that is that we consider the history and we accept that it is right that government departments implement different policies to respond to the concerns that the public and the voters, businesses, everybody in the community has at a given period. And I was reflecting on an article which was published in the Guardian newspaper that was looking at how the wider issue of immigration, and this one specifically, had become so toxic over the years. It made reference to the proposals that were put forward by a Labour government that, for example, the children of asylum seekers should be taught separately because they were swamping the classrooms of this country. Barbara Roche, who was the immigration minister for a number of years at the time when the current legislation was established, who talked about needing to be much tougher in order to deter people. And that was probably a response to a prevailing concern with the accession of the Visegrad countries into the European Union, and a lot of coverage in the media that said that this was going to lead to very large numbers of people arriving in the country with the right to work, and the understandable concern some communities had about the impact that would have on their local area, that the government wanted to demonstrate that it was concerned about that it was going to be tough, and that it was going to take effective measures to make sure that that impact was mitigated. And of course, as we've heard from the member for Bermondsey, today we face a period where COVID, Brexit, the changes in legislation around borders and free movement all add up to a very different picture. And the polling that's been done by British Future has identified that many people in those communities have, over time, come to see that asylum seekers, refugees who are in their local area are in a position where they can bring valuable skills and should be in a position to use those skills in paid work rather than subsisting for a very meagre amount on the taxpayer for a long period of time. And it seems to me a very conservative thing to say that we should expect people to pay their way. So when people arrive, and they could be working in our hospitals, they could be working in our care system, they could be working, frankly, in any kind of job for which they are fitted by their skills and experience, we should, as Conservatives, enable them to do that, rather than saying that other taxpayers should pick up the tab for their costs during the period whilst we make a decision on their long-term future. And that seems to be a view which is gaining a high degree of traction. So whilst I absolutely accept that there is a compassion argument at the heart of this, we also need to recognise that that compassion argument is not one which is attached to any particular political viewpoint. Governments have to make decisions in the light of the circumstances they face in the wider interests of the country. It was once upon a time in the wider interests of the country to apply these restrictions in order to have a borders and immigration policy that commanded public confidence. We now have an opportunity when so many businesses around the country are saying they're struggling to recruit workers, particularly skilled workers, for certain types of jobs. And we heard the farming industry, for example, talking about that over the summer period, how they were preparing for harvesting. We know in local authorities that recruiting staff to work in social care is a major challenge, and there is significant upward pressure on wages being reported, that there is now an opportunity to bring people in with those skills to make that contribution and to become tax-paying, economically active members of our society rather than subsisting on the taxpayer. And that is why I think it's time to make the case for a change in that policy, Mr. Chairman.